Well, the situation is that there's a lot like across the ravine on the other side of the most used view from our house, that's come up for sale. And the reason that so it's like if we don't buy it and somebody else does and builds, it'll be a disaster. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. Like if there's a house there, that's going to change everything. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this is something that feeds into this needing to make a decision and the stress around that. So let's look at that. If someone else builds on this lot that's for sale, it will be a disaster. Is it true?
Yes.
And can you absolutely know it's true? If someone else builds there, it will be a disaster.
No, I can't know.
So how do you react? What happens when you see this lot for sale and you have the thought that if someone ends up building there, it will be a disaster for you?
Oh, I keep asking my husband over and over again, should we buy the lot? Should we buy the lot? And he's saying no, and I keep asking again and again. So I'm a real bug about it. Um, I I feel like such a knot in my chest, and anytime I see a car go by, I'm like, oh my god, are they looking at the neighborhood? Oh my god, it's like it's a total panic. It's like I can't think of anything else other than, are they scoping out the neighborhood? Like, are they the ones who might buy it if I don't? Like, so I'm really like jumpy about it, and like consumed by the thought when there's any action on the road. And I I keep picturing it like looking out the window and seeing a house there, and like would it, like how much would we see it, how many trees would they take out, like, so I'm in the future of, oh my god, they're going to come and knock down all the trees. And that's why we moved here. And um yeah, i I'm very uncomfortable, I'm very nervous. Looking for other people's opinions. I called a realtor and asked her, and she said it's highly unlikely that that lot's going to sell because it's too steep to build on, in her opinion. And so I'm like questioning her now. It's like she told me what I wanted to hear, but now I'm like, highly unlikely. So highly unlikely, what does that mean? It's like, is that good enough? But if there's a single chance, it's like that's still a problem. So it's like I'm like I'm like really worried about something like it, and then I ask like a professional opinion, and then I don't even trust their opinion, you know. So
Yeah. And how do you treat your husband? What do you think? If someone else builds, it will be a disaster.
I treat him like um, he's not worried enough about this. Like he's not seeing the complete disaster that this could be. He's not like, so I'm treating him like he should be flipped out. If I'm flipped out, he should be flipped out. Like he's not helping because he's so calm about it. And he's like, because he's saying, like, it's only half the year that there's any way that we'll see this house. It's like there's so many trees between us and them that there's no possible way for 6 months of the year that we're going to see them. There's a possibility. And the lot hasn't sold, and it may not perk, and it may be too steep to build. So he's kind of like, just let it be. And I'm like, oh my God, but if somebody came in and bought a house, built a house there, so I'm totally in the future, and I'm thinking that he, if I ask one more time, he'll say yes, So it's like, how many times do I have to ask you before you change your mind?
And when you see you mentioned that when you, like, the whole reason you moved there, I don't know how many years ago, was to not have this. Yeah. So go back to those memories of what do you see there from the past of wanting to move and not have any houses around and that whole thing?
Well, this was like the dream, this was the, like that was like, when I don't see today, like when I look out, I'm already seeing a house over there that's not even there. Like I'm totally losing today because I'm worried about the future. So the images of when we first got here, it was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is amazing. And so I lose all of that when I go into the future, if that's the question there. Yeah.
So who would you be without this thought that if someone else builds, it will be a disaster?
Well, I could breathe deeply. I can relax. I can trust that it's going to work out for the highest good. That I can trust the realtor. I mean, it's like she's almost like losing a sale. Like, what realtor tells you it's highly unlikely that anybody's going to buy that? Like,
right.
I mean, that's not typical realtor response. Without the thought, I could just say, wow, it's still everything we ever wanted. It's still perfect. Stay in the present. Stop bothering my husband about it. It's like the last thing before he goes to sleep, and the first thing when he wakes up, I ask him.
I can imagine, yeah. Don't you see this disaster? It's just about to happen.
It's like, yeah, like, did you change your mind overnight while you were sleeping in the last 8 hours?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot more peace in the kingdom here. Yeah, because I'm peaceful, so that I'm not projecting that he should be on fire. Yeah.
So turn the thought around. If someone else builds, it will be a disaster.
Well, it won't be a disaster because of the buffer that we do have of trees and land.
Okay. Right. You won't even be able to see the house half the year.
Yeah. So that's not a disaster. That's more like an inconvenience than a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a disaster. I mean, if the house burnt down, that would be a disaster.
Yeah, disaster is what is the definition of disaster?
Yeah, disaster is something like you really can't come back from. Like,
Okay. Yeah. And in this case, I'm assuming it's that dream that you had when you first moved out there that's going to be ruined. That's what you're assuming is like it's a disaster. If someone builds there, then your dream can no longer continue. Is that the idea?
yeah. Yeah, it's like utopia has been demolished, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
they've paved
Right.
paradise and they put up a parking lot kind of
There
thing.
you go. So if they pave paradise and put up a parking lot in your yard, in your neighborhood, how how is it possible that even with a house over there, it would not necessarily end your dream of paradise? It doesn't necessarily have to end your dream of paradise. It doesn't have to be a disaster.
Well, it would definitely be the back of the house that we would see. So we wouldn't see people coming or going. Like it wouldn't have that
Okay?
kind of an impact. Um, they wouldn't drive by our house to get to that side. They have
Okay.
another road, so it wouldn't be more traffic on this road.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they might be nice people. I don't know. We might
Possible.
like
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, it's
After a
possible.
while, after we got
Right.
used to it. Um,
So, yeah, what was that dream? What is living out in the country and not having houses around? What was that dream specifically for you?
just nature, quiet, not people, not other houses visually. Just like to keep the total nature behind us, not
Hmm.
taking out any trees for as far as you could see. Yeah.
Hmm. And what was the idea behind that dream that it would give you?
Safety, mental peace, quiet, no visual
So,
pollution,
yeah.
no crazy
So,
neighbors, no barking dogs,
hmm.
no backyard parties, you know, like peace,
Right.
quiet.
Yeah. Okay. So, if somebody buys and builds, how is it possible that your dream could stay intact, that you could have safety, mental peace, quiet, uh, and even no visual noise in a way? Like, what I'm trying to question is, even if the house is there, can you find no visual noise?
If I don't look out the main window, I guess.
That's one example. Yes, absolutely.
There are other
Like
windows
that
I
visual, if you
can't.
call a house, yeah, if you call a house visual noise, then visual noise is happening in maybe 1 or 2 degrees out of 360 degrees. It's not everywhere. Okay.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but even if you do look out that window, can you find that it's not necessarily noise in the sense of something that would disturb your peace?
Well, because it's a POA, so they can only have certain colors on their house, which are very brown and gray, basically. It's very neutral around here, so everything blends
Hmm.
into the woods. So they can't do something that would be really pop out, like color wise. It will blend in to the trees. Like, so it
Yeah.
won't, I mean, they can't do, polka dots, or they can't do, you know,
So the impact is going to be minimal based on those
the
laws.
rules of the community. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And um, if you look at your life now and your life in the future, assuming that a house gets built, um, how much is it going to reduce your access to nature and to quiet and to uh, not having that many people around? How big is the impact in reality?
Not as big as I make it in my mind, the reality. And the, and the summer when we really are outside, that's when the trees are full and you won't see the house anyway. So
Yeah.
it's more like when you're inside in the winter. It's not the outside that we came here for, the hiking and the trails. I mean, that's that part. It's like when we're really outside in the yard, you're not going to see that house anyway, the imaginary
Right,
house.
right. And all those things, the hiking and nature is still there. It's
Right.
just, and there's a house.
Right.
The mind says no, right? Because it's like the white tablecloth and there's one spot on it. And then, oh my God, let's throw out the whole tablecloth because it's something wrong with it. But it's it's still usable depending on how you look at it, depending on what you do with it. Maybe you put a candlestick over it. I don't know. Or maybe you just don't mind. That's part of the story of the tablecloth. I mean, what is the difference between a house built now and a house that was built 100 years ago on land in the middle of nowhere, in a way? So if someone else builds, it won't be a disaster. That's the turnaround we're playing with here. How else, depending on how you hold it, how else could it not be a disaster for you, even if you do see this house half the year?
Well, it's going to be a house which is firm. It's like solid. It's not going to be like this neon sign that's blinking. It's not going to be distracting in the sense of movement. It's going to be,
Right. It's not
brick and
like
sided.
Las Vegas just moved across the street or something, you know. There's no it's just a house. Yeah. A
Yeah.
brown house probably.
So it won't be a
So
disaster.
not a disaster.
Well, because of the steepness of the land, they're going to have to build the house very close to the road on the other side. So, they're, they'll have to take out trees to put in a septic system, but they're not going to come any further down. Like, they're going to want the trees in between as much as we want the trees. I mean,
Great
it's
point.
like they're going to
Yeah.
take as few trees out as they have to. They're not looking to look at our house. Like, they're not, they're
They may
not
have the same
building.
dream of being,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's why
they may want
people
to be out in
move
the
here.
country too.
because they want the nature and the trees.
Exactly. Okay. Anything else good that could come from them building there in case they do?
Oh, to be over with, I could stop thinking about it. Like once
Be
it's
easier
done,
to deal with the reality. Yeah.
once it's done, it's done. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I lived once in North Carolina along the Blue Ridge Parkway, and there were just beautiful backdrop out all the windows. It was gorgeous. And after about 6 months, maybe not even that long, I didn't even notice it hardly anymore. And it's weird, even though it was beautiful, how the mind gets accustomed to something. And, may just get accustomed to a house there. But in the beginning, it's this big deal. The reality may not be as big a disaster.
right.
So is there another turnaround? If someone else builds, it will be a disaster.
If my thinking builds that house, it'll be a disaster.
I think
Because
you're already
every time
experiencing
I
that.
look out the window and I think about it, I get upset.
Exactly. You're living in hell thinking about it, even though nothing has changed.
Right. Right. My thinking is causing the disaster because it hasn't even happened yet. I mean, and it may never happen.
Right. And if it does happen, it'll still be the thinking that causes it to be a disaster because that all depends on how you view it.
Yes.
So if my thinking builds, it will be a disaster, right?
Yes. My thinking builds up this disaster in my mind. It'll definitely affect the quality of my and my husband's daily life. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, the original dream is kind of building something up in the mind that sets up the disaster because the conditions are so stringent. Like there can't be any people. It's got to be total nature. There's got to be, you know, uh, no barking dogs, no visual noise, all that. And so it's this. I built this thing. It's a dream, and that sets up a disaster, which the mind again uncreates by imagining a house that hasn't even happened yet. So all this disaster happens internally, ironically.
Yes.
Okay, any other turnarounds? If someone else builds, it will be a disaster.
I mean, if they don't build, it'll be a disaster. If they if they don't build, it'll be a disaster. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a strange turnaround. It's a kind of pushing it to the extreme there, but let's play with it. How could them not building be a disaster somehow? I don't know. We just have to imagine.
Well, just if they don't build, and I continue to see a house over there and keep looking and looking for it, it'll be a disaster for me.
Right. So far, that's the reality. They have not built, and it's already a disaster for you. You're living the reality of a disaster. Nobody's built anything.
Well, and I mean,
Yeah.
if it's like, first of all, somebody has to buy the land, then it has to get perked, and then they have to go through the association. I mean, nothing happens here in under a year and a half. I mean, that's
Right.
just the way of the land here. It's like, so
So you're getting a disaster long before it may ever happen, before any house even arrives. Yep. Yep.
Right. Yeah, so the biggest thing is the thinking and the mind and the visual projection and continuing to analyze the disaster, like the projection of the disaster.
Yeah.
That's obviously the problem comparatively to somebody actually building over there.
Exactly. It all depends on how you see it. If somehow that house was not seen as something bad, then it wouldn't be even considered to be a disaster in your mind. But as long as you're seeing it that way, then you'll have a disaster happen even if they don't build. You've already got, like, say they took the land off the market again, but there's still, you might rest a little bit, but they could put it back on the market. Like the disaster is just always waiting there when the mind is thinking that way.
Yeah.
And without that story that we have to have no one around in order to be at peace, then it's just nature. Houses, people are a part of nature, and it's the next evolution of that part of the land. Just as when you built, right? There's another turnaround. If we build, it will be a disaster. Maybe for the deer, it was a disaster when you built. I don't know. And they're like,
Well, I
why
know
is this nice?
we have neighbors across the street, and they told us they were devastated that we bought the land and that we were,
Okay.
I mean, they were just like came over and told us that they never thought anybody would buy these lots, and they were really devastated.
Yeah. So that's just balance there. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't built on land that someone else didn't want you to build on. And so the same thing is happening to you. And that's like, it's fair in a way.
All
It's
is
just the
fair in
way
love
it
and
is.
war.
All's right. But who knows? These people may be like you. They love the land and to be out in nature, and now they have a chance to do that, just like you have
Yeah.
had. And if you hadn't been able to buy your land, then those other people would have their space, but you wouldn't have the chance to experience that. So it's just interesting to think about it in these different ways.
Yes.